So I know when the excitement of Major League Baseball coming back, the other thing we were all looking forward to was the free agency period and how much the craziness was just going to come like an open dam. And opposed to a dam being broken and going through an entire city and flooding the world, it was more of a trickle effect. Then a little bit, like you would see in a sink. But here locally in Chicago, while there were huge moves going around nationally, locally, a lot of really good professional baseball players are going to be making Chicago their home. We talked about Joe Kelly, the most recent signing of the Chicago White Sox, and some of their other huge moves in just a little bit. But I also wanted to start this off with Seya Suzuki, who is now a Chicago Cub, the 27-year-old who signed a 5-year deal up to $85 million, a no trade clause. This is an interesting development for the Cubs because before the lockout started, Marcus Stroman signed. And then you have this deal now. And I wonder with Suzuki and with Stroman and Wade Miley and some of these other moves that they were making, they're over $150 million this offseason. How does that change the perception, knowing that the only teams really competing in the NL Central are the Cardinals, are the Brewers, and now the Cubs, because Pittsburgh and Cincinnati decided they're not in this. And on the other side, you have the White Sox making a really good team, addressing needs, having had that huge splash, and we'll talk about some of the players we thought they might have gone after, but they have been players in a lot of different conversations, not for the big ones. They're not teasing anybody, any fans. But I'm so fascinated because in that division, Detroit making a lot of moves. So we got to break this down. It's Paul Chivari. It's Devin Tingle. I'm Mike Mercado here on the Sports Cubicle. We are so lucky to have somebody who covers baseball here locally like a blanket on the Baseball Weekend Journal in Paul Chivari. Paulie, I'm excited about what both the Cubs and White Sox are doing. Let's talk about the Cubs really fast. This new 27-year-old right field, right-handed hitter, somebody who did really, really well in Japan, somebody who has awesome bat speed, has great hand control. Seems like they have a lot of faith in him. Your thoughts on this signing for the North Side?
Well, it seems like based on what the Cubs are doing, you bring up Stroman, you bring up Suzuki, you know, they're going kind of all out in free agency, but they're not going for the top free agents. You know, they're not bringing back the guys, you know, Bryant, Rizzo, and Schwarber have all found new homes. So it tells me just the overall picture of they're not blowing it up and totally rebuilding, but they're definitely in a shift right now. And I think that's evidenced by those two big signings coupled with some of the safe, low risk, low reward veterans like, you know, David Robertson, trying to get him to bounce back, you know, late in his career. Jonathan VR, utility infielder that kind of hits around a 100 OPS plus. You know, it's not the most glamorous Cubs team in recent memory, that's for sure. But at the same time, I don't think they're going to be cellar dwellers, especially with Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, like you mentioned, not really being in it this year. And Cincinnati has unloaded a lot of their best players. They're just going to be probably fighting Pittsburgh for the bottom of the division at this point to see who could care less between the two teams, I guess. But as far as Suzuki, you know, you've seen in recent years how Nippon Professional Baseball in Japan, how the best from over there are able to come over to Major League Baseball and succeed here. I mean, you know, Shohei Ohtani winning the MVP last year is a prime example. And they were calling him Babe Ruth in Japan before he signed with the Angels 5 years ago. So when you talk about a guy like Suzuki, definitely comes with a lot of hype, but that's a good thing. He's made the Japanese best nine several times in his career, already in his young career. He's at that right age where he should be right around the prime of his career. The Cubs are getting a really good outfielder, and they're getting him for a good price, and they're getting him good value for a long time. And it says to me that this is a guy, you know, one of their cornerstones that they want to build around. So
I'm really excited about
it. If it transfers, we'll see if it transfers.
Yes,
we'll see how he fares well at Wrigley Field.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but at the same time, I can't really say, because you just never know sometimes with a player coming from Japan. If he's, you know, just because he was great there doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be great here. But you've been seeing lately some of the top, you know, baseball is going to baseball. The top players that are just lights out over there do perform well over here.
Let me ask you this. The narrative of this highly solid free agent since the Cubs were in play, but so were like the Padres. What does it say to you that you have the Cubs winning out in this bidding war, having a good price for both parties involved, it all seems, and the fact that it seemed like the Cubs culture seemed to be something that he dug? Was it surprising to you that they not only won the services of a Suzuki who was very much scouted and there was some excitement for, but that they beat out a bunch of contenders and teams that we would think players would want to go to if they're offering them all that money?
Yeah, I'm curious as to why Suzuki picked the Cubs as well, but my biggest thought would be playing time. I think he'd be fighting for playing time in San Diego, whereas I think the Cubs expect him to be their top outfielder coming into the season. You know, there's Hayward, there's Happ, there's those guys. But I think when they're putting together, you know, when David Ross is putting together his lineup, I think he wants Suzuki to get, you know, the most starts in the outfield if he can.
Devin, you hear this, there is at the very least some potential hope, both in the potential and the hope of potential for Cub fans seeing some of these moves. They've spent money on a hopefully what might be a 1 or 2 this season, hopefully a 3 or 4 when they are real contenders, and a young right fielder who hits for power, and we'll see what he does at Wrigley Field. Your thoughts on the Cubs making a really interesting splash, not Carlos Correa, but an interesting splash nonetheless?
I mean, definitely something interesting here. You know, as we were talking before, Mercado, it's like, are the Cubs going for a full rebuild or a partial rebuild, or does this team think they got what it takes? I think this might be a partial rebuild where they're going to try and bring some new guys in, some young kids that they already have, and some veterans, and some guys, you know, overseas, clearly with Suzuki. My big thing, though, as we've learned just from Chicago history, what happens when you bring a guy over from Japan? You get 2 good years out of him, then he goes to, you know, Kaka land. You know, we learned that with Fubidome. We learned that with the White Sox, Sadhito Gucci. And it's just, you know, it's Chicago sports here. I mean, hopefully I'm wrong. Could be wrong. You never know. But it's just something interesting to see where the Cubs are going to go from a team that's like everything must go last year and we have no money. You know, they need to pay up back daddy. To now there's, you know, spending left and right, bringing guys in here. So it's definitely something interesting to see where is this, what do the Cubs think they are here? Because as you said, there's only 3 teams really in the NL Central that are actually fighting for that number 1 seed here. And I mean, I don't know if the Cubs are going to be first place. They may be a wild card contender. That's a bit more, in my opinion, that's harder to get than actually taking first place in the NL Central. But it's something different. And I mean, the Cubs will definitely be an interesting team to watch this year as opposed to the end of last year. It's like, who the hell are any of these guys here?
What do you guys think about this? I'll throw it to Devin. You bring up a good point about the extended playoffs. We know that they're interested, or at least Tom Ricketts and a group of partners are interested in buying the Chelsea Football Club. Something that Paul and I will talk about if it actually becomes official on a future episode of the Sports Cubicle. But when it comes to optics, let's say that they know full well that people think they're going to do that. Okay. And now you have the extended playoffs. Paulie, how much do you think that played into this? Knowing that there's only 3 teams competing in your division, or at least that's what it appears. And you have the optics of your ownership group who was crying poor the last few seasons, now going to spend $4 billion potentially on a football club, a soccer team. And you see them making these moves now. Do you think the extended playoffs and all those other circumstances kind of sped this up for them?
In what way? What do you think
they're spending like over $150 million after getting rid of everybody?
No, I think they've been very methodical with how they've gone through all of this, you know, because they had to wait to shed those contracts with Rizzo, Bryant, Schwarber. Who am I missing? The last year that they traded off Bryant, of course.
Bryant,
yeah. Yeah.
So you don't think the Chelsea thing, the optics, the extra playoff position, the extra playoff team had anything to do with them accelerating what they thought was going to be a true rebuild into a retooling?
No, I don't think so. I think they were already, you know, because they signed Stroman beforehand, and I think they were already interested in Suzuki before the lockout. I mean, there have been talks of expanded playoffs, and we knew that was a possibility. You know, players and owners both kind of, you know, liked the opportunity to make a little bit more money there and increase competition. But all the Cubs have to do is just really stay somewhat relevant. You know, if anything, all this does is just creates more of that August and September buzz of being close but no cigar. You know, that might get a few more butts in the seats at Wrigley Field if they're a little bit more competitive down the stretch. But when I look at this team, I don't look at a playoff team, but I see a team that could surprise. I mean, a couple of moves away couple of hot seasons from some young players. We still have yet to see if, Brennan Davis or Braylon Marquez could really make it with this team and be exciting young superstars. You never know what's going to happen in a baseball season. But when I see the way that they're spending and the team they're putting on the field already this year, I don't see a contender, but I see a team that's starting to build pieces, though. Stroman and Suzuki are great finds right now because they're young. They got them for long-term value. They expect Stroman to live up to his potential, which means he could be, a valuable ace, maybe a Cy Young Award winner someday, maybe. And with Suzuki, I think they see a guy that's going to be a power-hitting corner outfielder, which, you always need one of those, and they're getting him at good value right now. So we'll see what they do in the years to come. But I don't think the expanded playoffs really pushed it forward. And I think that's evidenced by some of the other guys that they've been getting. Like Wade Miley was a great value, but you don't know if he's going to be the guy that threw the no-hitter last year, the guy that's been having injury problems. He's just kind of a fail-safe lefty option in a rotation. You don't really build around a guy like that. When I see Jonathan VR, I see a guy that's, going to relieve Nico Horner and, find positions in the infield whenever a guy needs a rest, a starter, or if there's an injury. So, David Robertson too. I don't even know if he's going to make the team. He hasn't pitched well in a long time, battling through injuries and just struggle in 2021 in general. So give it time, though. I mean, these are either going to be guys that are going to be nice trade pieces for some, scratch and win single A guys, or they're going to be the veterans that are going to kind of keep the thing together in between division titles. It might take a season or two, but the Cubs are, they clearly have the money and they clearly have the ability to pack Wrigley Field, even if they're bad. And I think it would be unfair for the fans to expect the Cubs to be great. They gave you an era where they won a championship, and there's really not a lot of people that could ever say that, beforehand. So,
yep.
It's just slow and steady for the Cubs, and this year should be more exciting than last year. But I don't see a contender at all, and I don't think they force themselves into contention.
I think that's the most important thing, and I think that's what Cub fans want to hear. It's that they're not in limbo. It's not purgatory. Bears fans and Bulls fans for a long time have lived in that, and it's just recently that the Bulls fans have been able to get out of it. And it seemed like the Cubs were heading down in that direction if they weren't close, or at least it gave off that feeling. But at least right now, whether they're good or bad, whether they win 70 games or they win 81, it doesn't matter. Whatever happens to the Cubs this season, at least they have somewhat of a direction. And, I'm really interested to see how Cub fans are feeling about these moves. But I want to also move to the South Side in just 1 second. But I want to run through this last Cubs thing with you, Devin Tingle, and Paul Chivari. I'll run with Devin first on this one. Wilson Contreras, the last real piece, along with Kyle Hendricks and some remnants, including your manager of the old World Series regime, the team that Paul was talking about that created so many memories for Cub fans around the world. Now that the Cubs have the DH, and you're starting to see this roster being built and some of the long-term ideas, I don't think Wilson Contreras' value is at catching. He's a good catcher. He's got a great arm. His value is that bat, that energy, that soul that he brings to that team. Do you sign him to an extension if possible? And do you have him maybe catch a few days a week, but mostly he's when he needs time off, you save those legs and he's your DH? What would you do with Wilson Contreras?
I'd say a 1 year, 2 year contract max. See if you can, hack into the DH world. And that's going to be something interesting now that we see the DH being universal now. I mean, a lot of baseball purists are mad about it. I think it's a great idea. And it's going to be interesting to see some of these guys and even some of these National League pitchers now, they have to regularly face someone who's just an added bat. So it's going to be interesting to see, not just Contreras around the entire National League and even the AL too for his stint. Just now, everyone has the DH. It's going to be interesting to see what players are there. Are we going to see more players transition to DH in their older years? Or are we going to see them kind of be like, I'm going to be a fielder someday, or, catch a few days and DH a few days? It's going to be interesting. If I'm the Cubs, I would offer him like a small 1, maybe 2 years tops, just to see if he can hack it. Because there's some guys you put him in that DH role and they, believe it or not, they struggle miserably, which is very surprising.
Yeah, it's its own talent.
Adam Dunn.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Adam Dunn.
So I had something in my throat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, Devin, you bring up a bunch of good points about what the circumstances are going to be for a lot of teams, including Wilson Contreras. I think in order to sign him, it's going to have to be more than a 1 or 2 year deal. And with that in mind, Paulie, you hear that as we get ready to go to the South Side, finishing up this North Side conversation. Wilson Contreras, we know that he brings so many things that a lot of teams would love in a catcher, and offensively we would love in a catcher, but there's so much going on with this Cubs organization. What would you do? Would you sign him? Would you save some of those legs and have him in a rotation with a DH? How would you handle Wilson Contreras?
I think having a DH in the National League gives you that option where if you sign that, he's going to get JT Real Muto money. He's going to get a multi-year deal, top paid catcher when it's all said and done if he continues to perform well. And if the Cubs feel that he's a part of the future, they're going to have to pull the trigger on that deal. And the nice thing is that if he struggles behind the plate, they always got another spot in the lineup for him, and he doesn't have to play in the field. But defensively, he's pretty solid.
Yeah.
So that's a guy, catcher, first base, DH, I think would be pretty solid no matter what. But they're going to have to pay for him. And if they don't feel that he's part of the long-term solution, then you have to get max value for him. You have to go and get a great trade value for him.
And that's this year. This year,
and then that's this year. Yeah, right. He's a free agent at the end of the year, right? So I do think there's definitely teams that want him. I've always thought him and his brother would be a duo in Atlanta. Yeah. We'll see if Atlanta does have the depth where I think they can make a move, and give you great players in return. But at the same time, I think when you build clubs, where are you going to find a better offensive catcher just waiting in the wings? I think that's a guy you have to build around when the time comes.
It's going to be an interesting time, and make sure for all you Cub fans who want to listen to somebody who cares about the sport deeply, who knows his stuff inside and out, especially here locally. Paul Chivari has a wonderful podcast, the Baseball Weekend Journal. Check it out every single weekend to keep up to date with everything happening in the North and South Side with your Chicago Cubs and Chicago White Sox. Let me know your thoughts. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. The Cubs signed Suzuki. They got Stroman before the lockout. Where do you think this team is heading? We want to know your thoughts over at Sports Cubicle TV. Well, let's go ahead and head to the South Side. Paulie, this Joe Kelly move, I mean, if you're a lover of baseball, you've seen all the gifts, you've watched all the games. This is a guy that's been on multiple World Series teams, tons of playoff experience, something this bullpen needed. And the White Sox are acting like a pro team. They're getting guys. They haven't done the big splash. They didn't get Kyle Schwarber, who ended up in Philadelphia. They didn't get Chris Bryant, who ended up in Colorado. Javi's in Detroit and Rizzo's in New York, just to finish off the square that won a World Series for this team.
I thought they're all coming back, Mercado.
Yeah, I remember when I was telling all Cub fans that was for sure going to happen. I mean, there wasn't no way that the ugly divorce that the couple was going to get back together and just live happily ever after. No. And we could talk about the contracts and what would have been and what could have been had they signed, had they not signed. But that's for a different show. Paulie, Joe Kelly, other White Sox are being signed. They have a really interesting team. I don't know if this is going to be what gets them over the top, but I think these are great, solid moves for a team that is right on the cusp of winning the whole dang thing. Your thoughts on the recent acquisitions and some of the other moves that the bad guys, known as the good guys, have done? Shout out to Razor Ramon.
It's very telling. It's a very White Sox move to go out and get Josh Harrison to fulfill their need at second base. And I think they're expecting Leori Garcia and Josh Harrison to kind of compete for that role. And then in right field, you would have liked to see them get Chris Bryant or Kyle Schwarber or just someone to just hold that spot. But there's so much talent on this roster that you got to find time for Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn. And you still have a talented outfielder that was hitting the ball well on Adam Engel. There's a lot of talent on this roster, and they are running out of spaces to put all of these guys. So I think, they still have the core. They still have that solid 1 through 9 batting order. They didn't need to really address that, even though a lot of people expected them to go out and spend gobs of money when they really didn't need to. As far as pitching, yes, you'd love to see another starting pitcher in there, but they've got Lance Lynn, who could act as an ace, or Lucas Giolito, who's growing into an ace. You've got Dylan Cease, who might have a breakout year. But where you put Joe Kelly, you're hinging on Michael Kopech to be a great fifth starter or a reasonable guy. And you're probably going to rotate some guys in and out. Maybe Reynaldo Lopez from the long relief role. Who knows? But the Sox couldn't bring back Ryan Tepera, so they get Kendall Graveman. They bring back Craig Kimbrell in the hopes that maybe he'll be the guy that was pitching for the Cubs last year and the best closer in the National League versus whatever he was with the White Sox in the American League. But now you have Joe Kelly, which, with the nerve issue, who knows when he's going to come back exactly. But this is a gritty dude that's played in some big games. He's already won 2 World Series in his career. He's played in all sorts of championship series, World Series, division winners, the Cardinals, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, big teams, big markets. He knows how to pitch in big games. And if you remember, he was the pitcher on the mound retaliating against Carlos Correa and Alex Bregman back in 2020 during the pandemic, the first season after we found out that the Astros cheated in the 2017 World Series where they beat the Dodgers. Funny enough, Joe Kelly wasn't even on that team, but he was the one that was thrown at these guys. But that's Joe Kelly. One of my favorite Joe Kelly stories was I think it was like Game 6 of the 2013 NLCS and Cardinals and Dodgers. And for whatever reason, the Dodgers Skip Schumacher and the Cardinals Joe Kelly both stay out after the national anthem. I think it was like Schumacher did it and Kelly didn't move and he noticed. So they had a standoff, still standing while their teams went back to the dugouts, while the players took the field, and the umpire, Greg Gibson, had to be like, all right, let's start the game. And Kelly was the one who blinked first. But it just goes to show you that this is a guy that has a sense of humor, has a competitive edge to him, and will stand up for his guys. I mean, I want to say he's gotten into another another bench clearing brawl or whatever, where he threw at another guy. I think when he was with Boston, if I remember the incident correctly, there's one point in the last 5 or 6 years where, someone's charged the mound on him. And I'm not saying that you need guys that throw at guys and are dangerous like that. But at the same time, you need guys that can throw hard and can be more or less expendable in a lineup. If Joe Kelly gets ejected from a game, you still have Kendall Graveman and Liam Hendricks and Craig Kimbrell. You have a great bullpen behind him. I always loved, Joe Kelly when he was a free agent this year. I thought he would be perfect for the White Sox. I didn't think they'd actually go out and do it, but I really wanted him on the team. And I mentioned that in my White Sox Raiders podcast, the Karka Voices.
Shout out.
I was saying that to my co-host John Hooper. I was like, what do you think about Joe Kelly? And he, he was favorable towards him, but I've always been big on him, and I'm thrilled that the White Sox went and got him.
Yeah, 2 years, $17 million contract. Again, you get a professional, somebody who's been in the big moments. It's the one criticism I've had of this team. It's the reason why, even though on DraftKings, I put money on them multiple years to win the World Series, that their biggest downfall, and it's why I always was saying to avoid Houston at all costs. They don't have the same experience as some of these other teams. That's not the case anymore. They're starting to build those calluses, and now they're bringing in people who know it, who can teach it, who can show you it. And that's what this team has really needed. Devin, you hear the news of the White Sox going ahead and putting this roster together, being responsible, not being splashy or flashy, but bringing people in. And I think being very responsible, being, very calculative about these maneuvers. Your thoughts on what the White Sox are doing this offseason heading into April 7th, April 8th of the season?
Well, I think Joe Kelly is a great addition. He does kind of give me that sort of like AJ Brzezinski vibe where it's like he may be an ass. He might not get along with everyone, but he knows how to get in the other team's heads, and he's going to be entertaining to watch whether you love him or you hate the guy. I feel Josh Harrison was a great addition at second baseman. He was, from Oakland. He was an all-star last year. I know Paul says there's going to be a little bit of debate here, but the one guy that they signed that's really just it seems very White Sox-ish is Vince Velasquez. And if this had been like maybe 3-4 years ago, okay, but I got his stats right up here as I pulled them up. Since 2019, he was, had a very close to a 5 overall ERA. But from 2020, he has not had an ERA under 5.5. I mean, last year with San Diego, he finished with an 8.53 ERA. These are like Dallas Keuchel numbers last year. It's like we don't even know what we're going to do with that guy here.
What's his strikeout per 9 innings and his strikeout to walk ratio?
I got to pull that up.
How much do you think that would affect it, Paulie? When you hear something like that, where do you think the value from a player like that comes into for the White Sox?
And I want Devin to look it up because I don't know, but one thing I do remember about Velasquez with Philadelphia was that he is a strikeout guy. I mean, he'll give up runs, he'll give up hits, but he's a big strikeout guy. He's going to attack the zone. It's definitely a move by the Sox to see if he sticks. I think of it as like when they brought in Ross Detweiler a few years ago. It's like you don't expect the guy to make the rotation. But if he does, I mean, it's a veteran. It's a guy that's trying to prove himself. It's
another
fulfilling
arm.
the need. What's that?
It's another arm in such.
Yeah, it's another arm. Exactly. Yeah. And they needed a starting pitcher, and you wish they would have gone after someone better than Velasquez. But at the same time, your 5 is already set. You're hoping right now Keuchel can last. And if Keuchel doesn't, that's Velasquez. And I don't remember if he's a lefty or a righty. If he's a lefty, it definitely fulfills Keuchel leaving the rotation. But if Keuchel doesn't make it through the rotation, then they have all righties, and they got to address that.
We'll get back to Devin, who is going ahead and head up right now, but we want to finish up this thought with Paul that I have when we're talking about some of the strengths and weaknesses of this team. I mean, I think this team is so well balanced, but where would you say a team that has World Series aspirations, where do you think that their biggest drawbacks are? Is it the back end of the bullpen? Is it the front end? Is it the starting pitching? Is it the 4 or 5? Is it the position, the defense? Where is the biggest problem right now? If you're looking for the Achilles heel of the White Sox, we're talking about Joe Kelly being signed, some of these other moves that they have at second base. I think they still need an outfielder. Where do you think their biggest glaring issue is right now?
Probably second base, because I don't know if you're going to get great production out of a combination of Leury Garcia and Josh Harrison. I think it's an okay move. I mean, at their best, they're great hitters. It's at their best, but you just don't know. Harrison's, north of 30, and Garcia has just always been kind of that kind of spot starter utility guy. I mean, he blends well on this team. He had a great productive year last year. You're hoping for success there out of him. But I would say that, because I know you say they need another outfielder, but then what do you do with Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets? And you're talking about 2 great power hitters right there. You need to get those bats in the lineup. Otherwise, what's the point? So it's just unfortunate that the White Sox developed a bunch of first basemen. It's essentially their farm system has been like DHs and first basemen. So maybe we can get a few more like infielders and pitchers in that system. And it's a weak farm system this year. So they're banking on the fact that they've got these guys and that they're going to find ways. Tony La Russa is going to find ways to slot them all in. I guess you could say the back end of the starting rotation, because you're really hoping that, Kopech maybe gives you 140 innings, and you're hoping that maybe he pitches well. I mean, I know at his best, he has some really good stuff, but we haven't seen him go, more than a few innings since his rookie season before he got Tommy John surgery. So that's a big question mark right there. But when I look at this team, though, I'm looking at one of the top 5 teams in Major League Baseball right now. So, I mean, it's hard to find a weakness, and you can nitpick just about anything on any team. But with this team, I can't find a lot of things that I look at and say, oh, that's not going to work.
And that's why it's going to be so important to host those 3 games in the opening round if you're not one of the top records. But that's been something that we'll talk about later on throughout the season. Devin, go if you found the information, go ahead. But also, I want you to finish up your thoughts of the White Sox recent moves and how they're putting this roster together.
Yeah, well, last year, Paul, Velasquez had 101 strikeouts and only 49 walks. Not terrible. And again, he didn't. It feels like he didn't play there very much last year. But again, we'll see. Just high year.
How many innings did he pitch?
94 innings last year.
Okay, not a great strikeout through 9, but at the same time, you always want more strikeouts than innings, and that's the White Sox pitching philosophy is they want strikeout guys, and I think that's what they're banking on with him.
Yeah, and he's at 716 career strikeouts and only 298 walks throughout his career, and he's been there since 2015. So, are his best days behind him? Possibly.
Yes.
You think? Yes. Do you think that, but Paul, I'm going to throw us back to that. Do you think this is going to be one of those guys like his best days maybe behind him, but do you think we can get a year? They signed a 3-year deal. Do you think we can get at least maybe 2 good years out of him and get more out of him than we got out of good old Dallas Keuchel?
Are you sure it's a 3-year deal?
I believe I can pull it up right now. I mean, I
thought it was a 1-year deal because that would make more sense.
Well, go ahead, Paulie, and finish up that idea.
Well, okay, if it's a 3-year deal, that's a head scratcher. Then yeah, I mean, you're hoping that the guy can at the very least eat innings, and they might not be pretty, but he's going to have to eat innings. Even if he's on a 1-year deal, he's got to eat innings, and the hope is that he's just eating enough when you need it. When you're going to have pitching injuries. I'm worried that like Lance Lynn is due for an injury since he normally doesn't get injured. I'm worried that Dallas Keuchel's not going to see the end of the 2021 season because his, career is over at this point. I mean, he's looked terrible his last few outings of last year. Left off of the playoff roster, So I think you're hoping with Velasquez that at least he's just a plug-in, fill-in option. But I don't know if it's a 3-year deal. That's a bit of a head scratcher.
It's a 1-year deal, $3 million, but he does have an option after the end of the season. So,
and it's got to be a club option.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I mean, that's exactly it. And that's the thing is like with the club option too, is if he ends up being, a lottery ticket for them, low cost, high reward, if that ends up happening, then yeah, that club option is going to be so valuable. But no, I think his best days are behind him. I doubt he's like the Gio Gonzalez role essentially, but a little bit younger, I would think.
Throw us back to you then, Paul. Do you think the White Sox are more looking for not so much the long-term effect, but more like the quick fix to make this team, win the World Series this year as opposed to next year, 10 year, 3, 4 years from now?
Well, they're built to last. So I think a lot of their moves are made with the long-term in mind, but guys like Harrison and Velasquez aren't for the long-term. And even Joe Kelly, it's a little bit of a risk because of that nerve injury. You don't know what you're going to get out of him. But at the same time, I think it's still long-term where it's like, well, we need a gritty bullpen guy for right now and next year. If he's still good beyond that and the bullpen likes him and he meshes well on the team, maybe they go for that 3rd year. But I think, it's like going back with what I was saying about the Cubs. Like these are very methodical moves that even the White Sox are making. And they have the luxury compared to most teams where their roster was built. It was completed a long time ago in a slow process that you remember we sat through, Devin. It was some lean years, but that's why we have
SCO.
Yeah, that's why we have the guys that we have now in town. And they're built to last at least for this window. I think between now and 2025, they should have a few division titles or a few playoff appearances under their belt, more than just the 2 that we've already seen.
We want to know your thoughts, Sox fans. What did you think about the recent transactions? Do you think this team is now even closer to winning a World Series? We know they got to get out of the first round, but every single move they made gets something that much better. I think they're making sure that they're going to be prepared for all different storms that they're going to have to weather this coming up season. But you know what? It's not just that our local teams in the Cubs or the White Sox have done some interesting moves. Let us know your thoughts on Sports Cubicle TV on Twitter. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado here on the Sports Cubicle. But we mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the Cubs. We know Kyle Schwarber has now ended up in Philadelphia. We know Anthony Rizzo has ended up in New York, and Chris Bryant is heading to the Rockies, and he is making some money. I want to talk about this with the panel around the cubicles. The guy, the man, the myth, the legend who won the 2016 NL MVP, a World Series championship with the Cubs, who was a stalwart, the prodigy, the natural for this Cubs organization. He signed a 7-year deal with the Colorado Rockies, $182 million. That's $26 million per year. He is the 4th highest paid third baseman in Major League Baseball. And it's going to be interesting with the no trade clause as well, that he found a home. And I think this is a guy that was underappreciated here for a lot of Cub fans. I think Rizzo got a lot of love. Schwarber got a lot of love. Javi, who's now in Detroit, got a lot of love. And seeing what Bryant's got, seeing where he went, just some of these moves. Paulie, I'll start off with you, the host of the Baseball Weekend Journal. The Cubs, the ex-Cubs, the championship Cubs who found new homes, and Freddie Freeman finding a home in LA. Some of these other huge free agents, destinations that have been filled. What are your thoughts on MLB going crazy the last few days?
Well, it needed to happen. We predicted that it was going to be pretty wild. And, these guys get a little bit of a delayed start to their spring training, but at least they're not wondering where they're playing on opening day. I thought it was interesting that Bryant goes to the Rockies, though. I wasn't really sure what the Rockies think of themselves, if they were going to totally just rebuild and start from scratch, or if they were going to try and go piece by piece. And you and I, we've talked for years, Mercado, about who would you rather have, Nolan Arenado or Chris Bryant. And, I always picked Arenado in that battle. And I guess the Rockies kind of took your side on it, where they said we'd rather have Chris Bryant. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think you're great either way. And I think with Bryant, you get a little bit of, all over the diamond. You can kind of, use him, whether it's in the outfield or the infield. Whereas Arenado is just straight up a third baseman. So I think, in that sense, there's a little bit of flexibility for the Rockies, and it's a good investment. But at the same time, it's kind of one of those, weird. I wouldn't have done it that way, but I'm not the one putting together the team. But Schwarber, I mean, I was a little bit surprised that he went to the Phillies, especially because I think he's essentially going to be opposite Bryce Harper in the outfield, I suppose, unless they decide to use them at first base like the Red Sox did. Phillies are going to be a good team, and I think Schwarber kind of fits with that. I don't know what his home run record is at Citizens Bank Ballpark in Philadelphia, but if it's good, then who knows? With circling back to Bryant, though, his numbers are going to get inflated in Coors Field, and that's good for him. We might have just seen Chris Bryant really accelerate what could be a Hall of Fame career by making that move. Rizzo going back to the Yankees, I heard that the Yankees just were in love with him and they weren't getting in on Freddie Freeman or Matt Olson. So I think that was just kind of their fail-safe there. And then Baez on the Tigers is kind of interesting because I think the Tigers are really trying to build around him. He's going to be a veteran leader on that team. And it could be an interesting fit. I think it's going to be neat to see him in the American League Central and being on a young team. Once again, Javi Baez finds himself on a young up-and-coming team with top-notch talent. We know how it worked the first time, and he wasn't even really one of the leaders on the 2016 Cubs. Now he has a chance to be a leader on a Tigers team that could potentially win a World Series if they get all the right pieces in place.
Paulie, I'm going to throw it to Devin, as I can't believe how fast this edition of the Sports Cubicle has come and gone. The biggest free agent move that you've seen so far. Of course, anybody who wants to be up to date, make sure you're checking out Paul on Baseball Weekend Journal. He'll keep you updated with everything going on in Major League Baseball free agency. But in 30 seconds, can you give us what's been the most interesting, outside of former Chicago players, the most interesting free agent move?
Before the lockout or after?
Just in general. Now that we're this far into the free agency period, pre and post lockout, which one has surprised you the most?
Corey Seager to the Rangers.
Yeah. And that, you know what? And when it happened, it definitely has cooled down, but that's a really good pull. Why? In like 20 seconds, why for you was that such a weird move?
Well, one, also kind of like to couple that with Marcus Semien, because it just showed that the Rangers are really serious about spending money, and they're serious about having the middle of their infield be the most expensive part of their team. But yeah, I think to me, it signals that the Rangers expect to start contending. I think they're far away from it, but I think when you bring in a guy like Seager, you're saying, hey, we're willing to do what it takes to win.
Devin, last 2 minutes to you. The MLB free agency has been crazy. Your thoughts on former Cubs ending up somewhere, maybe Freddie Freeman, where he ended up. What has piqued your interest the most of Major League Baseball free agency period?
Well, first, to go back to Paul's thing about how many home runs Schwarber's hit in his career in Philadelphia, he's only had 11. So, I mean, is it possible to throw in that DH role? Maybe. I don't know. When you're playing there, more than, however times they, throughout the season. I got to say, Chris Bryant definitely shocked me going to the Rockies, but a team that finished in 4th place. I mean, it definitely kind of shows. So I feel Chris Bryant was a guy who kind of wanted the money, whereas Anthony Rizzo went to a team that, he wanted to win on. And the Yankees, definitely are a good team. They've been trying to get Rizzo for years. It definitely seems like that could be the right thing for him there. But we're just going to see. It's very interesting now. I mean, Justin Verlander signs with Houston. I thought for sure, they're going to be like, thanks for your service, but we want to move on a different direction here. But it's going to be interesting here. We're see, of course, we've had baseball for, about a week back now, and it's just been, it's been hard to keep track with everything going on right now. Every day I get like a ding from ESPN on my phone at the point I'm like, I forget who's still available anymore and who's gone where. But definitely, it's going to be interesting to see what this season's got to bring. We're seeing a lot of, guys that have been, stables of one place going somewhere else. And all I want to say is whatever you want to say about the White Sox, at least we kept their MVP, Mercado.
Let us know your thoughts on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. We want to know, guess which team does Carlos Correa play for? Who does he sign with? And guess the date in which we find out that news. That's on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. We'll find something fun for the winner. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much. You're here on the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM.